Hey, we're back and we're going to talk all things raw material testing. Hey, Vanessa.
Hey, Brian. Raw materials. Ooh, the world is open and free. All the raw materials that could be. Oh, did
It is
that
a
rhyme?
yeah, it is a
Rhyme.
very sort of broad focus area. It's not necessarily just API starting materials. There's a lot of components that go into sort of raw
Yeah.
material testing that cannot be overlooked. So, sites and organizations may not have the lab space and or sites to be able to test for every facet of raw material testing that may be required. So oftentimes, we can outsource microbiology. So you may outsource micro testing, but there may be other critical areas of raw material testing that you'd want to confirm. So when I worked in the personal care side of the business under the FDA umbrella. Part of a brand's ethos was, clean beauty. So that meant that every raw material that a third party was providing to a third party manufacturing organization needed to be tested for heavy metals.
Right.
So and it may be part of the quality of the raw material that's being provided. And so when we're talking about raw material testing, also it's not just from raw material providers, but also from distributors. And this touches back on when we were talking about supplier quality inspections. And if there is a third party that's providing that raw material, you have a right to go inspect them and understand what their supplier quality inspection process looks like. I hate to say it, but I found that once you get 2 to 3 distributors away, that C of A probably isn't worth the paper it's printed on. And so you've got to be able to confirm and test your raw materials against those core components that are on that C of A itself.
Including micro. Including micro.
Absolutely.
Don't
Yeah.
just take my word in at face
Yeah.
value on that
Yeah.
CRA. Yeah.
There's a lot that can go into it, I guess, with if you have a long history and relationship with a particular raw material provider or supplier. I've seen sites previously go to skip lot testing or once every X number of tests, but there are certain tests that you should do every time. And it's incumbent upon, that organization to understand, as defined in the quality agreement, what you're going to test for, and certainly to the type of material that's being provided and its quality. Change control becomes a critically important thing with raw material suppliers as well, to understand whether they're changing something in an API that you may not be aware of. And you might only find that out by doing testing. And so then you've got to trust those third party laboratories to be able to perform that testing on your behalf that you've defined with them, because you may never see that material, right? It may be at a third party manufacturing organization. You may have a specific requirement that they have to source a raw material from a particular vendor or raw material supplier, right? So, when we talk about raw material testing, it's not just the actual testing and release of that material for use. It touches on a lot of different areas that could be outsourced to other third parties as well.
So, Brian, let me ask you, why do you think, so like we mentioned earlier in the series, that cleaning is something,
Mm.
cleaning
Hmm.
is a function that is often outsourced.
Yeah.
Why do you think when it comes to like testing, raw material is so commonly outsourced? Is it because companies don't want to have a QC sampling booth? Is
Yeah.
containment an issue? I find a lot of companies hesitant to
Yeah.
manage powders and to have all of the PPE.
Yeah.
And while I can understand that is something to navigate, that can be difficult to navigate, to have in your warehouse a dedicated area.
Yeah.
I've been in some interesting QC sampling booths, right?
Yeah.
But why do you think that it's almost common? It's very common to have raw
Yeah.
material be outsourced when it comes to testing.
It is, it is an interesting subject. To what you were saying previously, it's sort of like that HEPA on wheels. You know what I mean,
Yeah,
with the rubber or with the plastic curtains, that you just sort of, that is your classified area within a completely unclassified surrounding, right? So in
yeah,
a warehouse. And so, you touch on a lot of different things associated with it. There is, construction required potentially if you don't have that in house to be able to build what that looks like, a proper
right.
sampling area. and to do proper AQL inspection and to do
Right.
proper testing of from every drum, from every container, from to put that together. And so sites may opt to outsource that because they don't have the capital to be able to invest in it in the short term.
Okay.
So I have seen it both ways, but I think it becomes one of those areas of what is the cost benefit analysis to be able to take this and do it internally.
Right.
And to your point, there may not be the QC lab that's able to test against everything that you may want to test it for. So in that area, you may choose to outsource testing to a particular laboratory that is qualified to test in that particular way. So, when it comes to controlled substances, in some cases, what are the
Also,
requirements associated with that beyond
good
just the
point.
raw material testing? So there's a lot of chain of custody requirements in place in management that may be could be outsourced, but
Yeah.
you need to have
Kind
oversight
of seems like
of.
its own niche
Yeah,
little space in
yeah.
terms of control.
Particular raw materials may have requirements, but again, if it is a material that is very special to your manufacturing process, probably it makes sense to bring it out in house in the long term.
Yeah, I've
All the
seen
management.
companies who don't have gases
Yeah.
like
Right.
nitrogen,
Yeah.
oxygen, purchase cylinders
Yeah.
of them.
Yep.
And then it like for some reason it never clicks that they need to test it
Yeah.
or that they need to think about,
Yep.
processing it, especially from a microbiological perspective.
Yeah.
So, and even if you send an entire cylinder, I don't know what that looks like, but gases is something that sometimes is outsourced before it even
Yeah.
gets to the facility. And or they just like take
Accept
the
it.
C of A and the data
Yeah.
on the C of A, which is never
Yeah.
recommended. So, but I find the whole raw material testing and it being something that's commonly outsourced pretty interesting. I know
Yeah.
that, like, the release requirements for raw materials can be unique, like nitrates and heavy
Right.
metals and all that kind
Yep.
of stuff. And maybe you don't have that in-house capacity. So it would make sense to outsource. That's great,
Yeah.
though. Thank you,
Yeah. No
Brian.
problem.
That was fun. I love talking raw materials. I often think, as a plug for microbiology, don't
Indeed.
underestimate the microbiological impact and quality of your raw materials. So
Yeah.
I'll end on that note. Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for starting us out on this great conversation.
Of course. Glad to talk to you.